Hey, everybody. This week on Medicine 3.0, your podcast for precision health, AI in healthcare, I've got Kelly Joniak. She's one of our Bionic advisors. She is a wealth of information around strength training, lifting, how to think about fitness progression. This was a really cool conversation. She is young, but she has had so much great experience. She laid down a ton of wisdom for me. Hopefully you guys can take something out of it. I'm sure you will. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Kelly, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Jared, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be a part of it.
So you and I talk all the time about exercise, lifting, and I want to really dig in with you, but I'd love for everybody to kind of get to know you. So if you can give a little bit of background to start.
Yeah, so my background is kind of all over the place, I like to say, but I think that's what makes learning that much better and all the experiences you have. But I actually went to undergrad at University of Oklahoma as a meteorologist, so completely different world and topic. But I quickly realized I wanted to work more hands-on with people and be able to see the changes I'm helping make. So I did my undergrad in health and exercise science there. I worked in sports nutrition with football and basketball and a couple of the other sports during that time. Then after graduating, I knew I wanted to do a master's degree, but I didn't know in what. Thought I wanted to be a dietitian, wasn't sure, so kept trying to find internships that might be able to help me figure out my path a bit better. So I ended up doing a summer training camp internship under Jennifer Gibson with the Chicago Bears. And then that turned into a full-time opportunity. And then after I had graduated, I did a couple months at Exos, a human performance company based out of Arizona. They have a few facilities across the US, but that's their headquarters. So I did nutrition and strength and conditioning there. Then my full-time position with the Bears started right after that, did 2 seasons with them in sports science and nutrition. And then I made my way to where I'm at now, North Carolina. So I did my master's degree in exercise physiology under the direction of Dr. Abby Smith-Ryan in the applied physiology lab. And now I'm here at Bionic.
Awesome. And of course, I met you in Dr. Smith-Ryan's lab, and,
Yes.
We've already done a lot of fun things together, including building out kind of our performance testing and our protocols for that. How do you think about like testing people for strength and quality of muscle and those types of things? So that's been really fun. But today I'd love to dig in with you on how we think about building muscle, helping people learn how to lift, start lifting, things like that. And you have such a great kind of diversity of areas that you've worked with really high level athletes. I mean, I've heard the University of Oklahoma has a football team.
Just a few players there.
Just a few players. Obviously the Bears and Exos. So really, really high level athletes. And I'd love it if you could take me through, and you can go back to Oklahoma if you want. You can start at Exos with the Bears at UNC, but I'd love to learn some of the things you've learned about how to train, how to think about training others in regards to strength building and weightlifting, things like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'll go chronological. I'll start with Exos because that was my more hands-on strength and conditioning side of things. And one of their mottos in my time there was to do the simple things savagely well. And I think about that all the time because that's really what's going to help pay off in the long run. You can have the perfect design program, but if your nutrition and your sleep and even your hydration aren't kind of dialed in, then we're probably not going to see as much progress as we want because all those things are impacting it. So you have to think about all those things. And then even if you think about mobility and those little things that we're just like, oh, I just don't want to do that today, or maybe I skip my warm up, but that's taking away from a lot of the progress that we want to be making, even if you don't notice it right away. But in the long run, it's going to be really important. So always thinking about those little things and kind of chasing the best you can for it, whether it's finding 5 minutes while you're watching TV to do a quick mobility or a little yoga before bed or something is going to help. Same thing, dialing in nutrition, prioritizing protein and the macronutrients that you need in order to have the success that you want. And then at the Bears, I would say that one of the things I learned is just how you periodize training. So with that, we want to manipulate the variables that we have to achieve certain goals. So obviously we can design a program to be more muscle endurance based, strength, hypertrophy, power, whatever the goal is. And obviously football, very specific, strength and power, very quick bursts. You're not running a long distance, but you still need to have a basic foundation to build on. So having your base phase, I like to call it, in the preseason is going to be really important. So training looks different. You might have a little more quote unquote endurance for football. It's not going to be like a runner, but you'll have that to develop some of these skills. Then you'll have higher volume so that you can develop this base first in order to have the hypertrophy and the strength development. So then being able to see that in action from what I learned in school actually be transferred was really important. And I also learned about the importance of Olympic weightlifting during that time. I worked really closely with Pierre No, who's one of their assistant strength coaches currently, and he's a big Olympic strength guy, but he taught me that if you can teach someone that, then you can coach almost anything, and I think that's true because there's so many benefits to those movements, and as long as you teach them properly and build on a foundation, then you're not going to have a high risk of injury, but you have to learn the right way. And then at UNC, I learned more than I ever thought I could learn in my time there, and it was only 2 years. Dr. Abby Smith-Ryan is absolutely incredible, and I owe a lot of the things hurdles I've overcome for my own beliefs about what I can do because of her. But one of the things I learned is to always question, and I think I always had some of that inside me, but she kind of empowered me to realize that we can answer the questions that we want. It may take time, it may be frustrating. Research especially is a slow, grueling process, but we have these tools that can measure the things we want, but we have to make sure what we want to measure, we're actually measuring. And that's a basic principle in research and science that I think sometimes gets lost sight of when you're on the applied side, but she does a really great job of teaching us how to translate the research to the applied. And she placed a huge emphasis on the application side. So for every research paper we write and everything we do, it's okay, this is great, we have this information, but why do I care? Who am I gonna use this on? What's the importance? So those are a lot of big lessons I've learned at these 3 places, but they're at the core of everything I try and do and how I look at things.
I love it. The simple, what was it? Do the simple things savagely well.
Yes.
That is such a great motto.
Yes.
Just
Have to give credit to Exos. It's fantastic, and
Yeah.
one of their core, the structure of their facility is on different pillars, and that includes rest. And I think a lot of times we forget that. We think we have to do more, but you should also do rest savagely well. You have to let your body recover, and it's just those little things that if you ignore them once, you might ignore them again, and then we keep adding it on, and that's going to be where the detriment occurs.
Yeah, I'm rehabbing a hamstring injury right now, and it might be because I don't treat my mobility savagely well. I don't. It's possible that I don't do that as well as I should. So I'm gonna take that to heart and make some changes around
It's
my.
just room for improvement.
That's right.
Yes, we always have room for improvement. We're not perfect, and that's okay.
Yep.
But there's always an opportunity for growth somewhere.
Exactly. Progress over perfection, always.
Yes, exactly.
So I love those. So the things, I kind of took some notes on that. So, get the basics, the foundation, like get those things really well. And we talk about this all the time, like really focusing on moving your body, sleeping well, nutrition, hydration, like basic things for life. But then if you want to add on top of that some fitness level, because we believe that everybody needs to work on their fitness to be their best self. And then I loved the idea around kind of specificity of training. Like in the NFL, you've got people that you're going to train them different than a marathon runner. Also based on their goals, right? Like you probably train a running back or quarterback differently than you would a lineman. And then the idea of foundational kind of teachings that with your Olympic weight coach that you talked about. Like you get the foundation right, and then you do skill acquisition and you build upon that, which is so important with weightlifting and exercise, because there's simple stuff like going to walk. Like you really don't have to teach a lot of technique there.
Right.
But Olympic,
Although sometimes it depends. We adopt some interesting gait patterns sometimes in compensation, so you never know.
that is true. That is true. We don't do that yet. We don't
Yes.
do gait analysis yet, but maybe you're going to add it into what we do. You'll start having
Maybe.
people send recordings of their walking,
There's
and
a gait lab down the street. I know, God.
I know, I know. I've actually done a gait analysis. I've had one done. I've done a
Oh,
running analysis at a local physical therapy office. So it's good. It's good stuff.
yeah.
And if I'd listened to them, I probably wouldn't have had my hamstring pulled. Um,
It's the little things. They
it's
add up.
they do add up. The always questioning, I love that too. But what I love even more than that is what you said, that Abby Smith Ryan taught you, was that you can find answers to your questions. Like you can come up with the right way to test and find and then put into practice the things you learn.
Mhm.
So I think that is a great foundation for us to kind of build off of and talk through. Okay, how do we take all these things that we know,
Mhm.
and how do we put them in practice with one of our members? Like our members come in, they don't necessarily care about all this stuff. All they want is guidance. They need like the step by step. And so let's start off, like, let's say we have somebody who comes in and they have a desire. So they have to start with something, and at least a desire.
Mhm.
And they have the desire, like, I want to learn how to strength train. And if they don't have that desire yet, I'm going to try to instill it in them.
Yes.
And all the other physicians and you and our other advisors, we're all going to try to instill like this desire to weight train and get strong or
Even if
stronger.
it's not fun, something is going to be helpful if nothing else.
Exactly, exactly. And so I'd love to hear, well, actually, first, I'd love to hear your sales pitch. Like, what would you tell a member, like why they need to add this into their life? And then like how you would start thinking about helping that person to build out a program or do something to change.
First, for a second, I think you asked about my sales pitch of why someone should weight train.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, my my first and foremost number one pitch is that it's already been shown in research that having more strength and even muscle mass as we age is going to improve quality of life. We may want to make changes now for whatever the reason is, but we also want to be looking ahead. Where do you want to be in 10, 15, 20 years? Do you want to be able to live on your own when you're older? Or, are you going to want to be able to stand up out of the chair or anything on your own? And that's why strength is so important. And then for females, especially, with bone mineral density, that's always a main concern, especially with the hormonal changes that occur through perimenopause and menopause. And whatever you can do now to kind of add to your bank account, so to speak, is going to be really important. We want you to cash out when you're older and have the life that you want to live, but it starts now. It's an investment in your future, just like you would do for your retirement fund. It's the exact same.
Yeah. My family, so I think I've told you, I have 8 sisters.
Hmm.
And my mom has osteoporosis. I have sisters with osteoporosis. And I don't know. I have one sister who's probably stronger than me. Like she weight trains and she lifts heavy, but
Good for her.
everybody else doesn't. I mean, I guess it's okay for her. I would rather be stronger than her. I wish she'd like lay off it a little bit, but
We have to embrace it. Keep empowering the women.
this whole acceptance thing, I don't know. I want to accept
I'll
some
help guide
things.
you through it.
Okay, thank you. But like I look at my sisters and my mom. My mom is, I think, 84, 85 now. And so it's a little bit, it's not too late. Like I want her to weight train, and I talk to her about that all the time. But my sisters, for sure, they're in 50s, early 60s. And I'm like, guys, you really have to, like, you have to do this. You don't want to end up with a broken hip. You don't want to end up with spinal spinal fractures, any of that stuff. So you pitch people on, okay, this is how we want to think about the future.
Hmm.
What do you kind of pitch them on for, like, this is the benefit you're going to get right now. This is why you should care right now about it.
I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is a boost in confidence,
Hmm.
honestly. And that goes for both men and women, but especially for females that have been taught to be more rep centered and not strength based, and you're gonna be too bulky or whatever. That's not the case. We don't have those hormones to do that, and it's great to be strong and have this ability to do things you never thought you could do. So I think it one shows people that they are stronger than they think they are. That's one thing that I also learned at the Bears. I worked where he was one of the performance coaches for a long time, longest in the NFL, I think, like 35 years. His name's Clyde Emmerich. He passed away a couple years ago, but he competed in Olympic weightlifting in the 1952 Helsinki Olympics, and I was the
Wow.
last person that he ever got to coach. So he and I had it was a short-lived time together, but it was a good bond, and he always taught me you can always do more than you think you can. And for me, who's always loved being strong and lifting weights, to be told that and shown that is something that I've seen now in other females as well is just incredible, and it's something that I hope to continue to promote. And that's part of my pitch too. Like, your confidence just goes through the roof because you really can do so much.
I love that. And I've seen that again and again with people, women, my sisters, my wife, when they start weight training, there is a confidence. And it's awesome to watch somebody who could never do, like, a great strict push-up do 20 strict push-ups, and or else not be able to do a pull-up and be able to nail strict pull-ups. Like, and that
Exactly.
confidence, like, you can see that in the way they move in the world, the way they do things in the world, the way they talk, the way they feel. So
Yeah,
I think
you
that's,
stand a little taller,
yeah,
honestly. I mean,
yeah.
it's kind of funny. I was just talking to a friend yesterday. She hasn't loved strength training, but she enjoys doing like yoga sculpt, which has weights.
Mm.
Hopefully down the road we can have a little more. But she just looks like she's in a much, like she said to herself to me yesterday, she was like, I'm so much more confident. Like, I can tell that I'm getting stronger, and she was really excited about that. And it's just really special when people can experience that for themselves. And getting to that point at first is hard. Like, any change you make is going to be hard, especially with something new that we're not good at. But when you're frustrated, that's when the improvement comes. My dad always told me that failure is fertilizer, and it's absolutely true. And we have to kind of fall down in order to get back up and climb up that next step. So it's just part of the process.
You have all the great sayings. Failure is
I have so
fertile.
many.
There's so many great ones, and people
I'm
don't
lucky to have a
know.
lot of like, people that are very wise in my life. So
Yeah.
I've been lucky in that.
And people don't know that you're an old soul, that you, like, are Dave Matthews Band fanatic. Like, how many
Yes.
concerts have you been to now?
22, just of him. I know. I've always been an old soul. When I was a kid, I used to follow my dad around to all the events and parties that he was at with my mom, and all the kids would be playing together, and I'd be talking to the adults. I just have always naturally navigated that way and been that way. And I love to golf. I'd rather just be on a golf course half the time. Don't really have the time right now with training, but it's just
Yeah,
kind of funny how it works out.
yeah. So actually, let's go on to your training, and then I want to jump back to this beginner. So your training, how long have you been Olympic lifting?
It'll be, I think, about 3 years now. I started, I think, in 2021 after my first bear season. I started during COVID, so we were in the bubble. I was a tier one, so I was with the players, so I couldn't do anything except for go to work and go home. But as soon as that ended, I was donating nutrition products to a local gym, and one of that strength coach I told you about, Pierre, no, he would go train there sometimes, and any product we couldn't use went to them. And I just so happened to fall into the hands of Team USA head coach Mike Gattone there, and he took me under his wing with another coach, Casey Knuth, and yeah, it was, the rest is history. I went to learn just how to coach, and they said I should just try it too, and here I am, 3 years later, almost four, loving it.
That's awesome. And tell me about, well, for those who don't understand the difference between
Mhm.
like Olympic lifting and powerlifting, like help people understand what you mean when you say Olympic lifting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, great question. Lots of confusion because the names don't even align with the sports. So, powerlifting as a sport is squat, bench, and deadlift as the three main lifts that you compete in. Whereas weightlifting, capital W, the sport of weightlifting, is Olympic weightlifting, and that's where you compete in snatch and clean and jerk. And then if you are just a casual lower W weightlifter, then that's just lifting weights in the gym. Still beneficial, but those are the three ways to delineate it. Lots of confusion around those typically.
Yeah. And so you do big W
Big
weightlifting,
W
Olympic
weightlifting.
weightlifting,
Yes.
and explain to people what's different about those lifts that makes them unique and interesting and hard and skilled and all those things.
Well, I'm not sure if you might want to keep this one in the podcast or not, but I'll use another quote from Clyde Emmerich. But he called powerlifting unskilled labor
Oh,
because you're just doing exactly that. You're picking up a heavy weight. It's very impressive, but there's less technique. There's still nuances that, of course, go into having a good technique and good form. But in general, Olympic weightlifting is a very unique movement. So you don't really see them, or many variations for that matter, that anywhere else. So it's all technique based. You have to be strong and you have to be powerful, but if you have bad technique, strength and power can only compensate for so much. Like you have to learn the proper technique to be successful in it.
yeah. I mean, when I watch Olympic weightlifting, if you don't have the skill, it doesn't matter how strong you are,
Yes,
right? Like
absolutely.
if you lack the right amount of skill, you can't even do the lifts. And then to
Yes.
be elite, you have to have a ton of skill.
And it's
Uh,
all physics and biomechanics because, for example, a lot of times in CrossFit, it's coached where you want quote unquote more hips, like swinging your hips forward like a kettlebell, because that's how it kind of looks when you watch a video. But that's not what you want at all. You're actually focusing on pushing force into the ground to move the implement. So, in order to do that, if you're pushing your hips out, now the bar is detaching and going out in front of you, and it's going to be pretty hard to save a lift. What you want is to keep the bar moving in so you can have as little horizontal movement as possible, as vertical as you can, and then that's going to help be able to make sure you're transferring as much force and power into the bar to get it over your head. So it can be challenging.
I feel like I know everything I need to know now. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to
Well,
grab the barbell.
you let me know when and where, and we'll get you doing some movement soon. It all
Uh,
starts with a simple pull, and we'll go from there.
I know. I've never really tried Olympic lifting, and it scares me. I'm unskilled labor. I'm not sure that, and
We'll
I'm
try
not
some
sure that it's.
variations.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Okay, let's jump back to, okay, now we have this person who is, we convince them. They're like, okay, I want to put it in my bone bank account, my muscle bank account. I want to do that. I want to feel more confidence. I want to feel better. I want to start lifting.
Mhm.
How do you take them from zero to something? And let's just say, let's do this on like a 2 month time horizon. What are you going to do with them during that 2 months?
Well, I think it's important to start with another one of my favorite quotes in strength and conditioning. I learned this at Oklahoma, and the best answer to any question, which is very frustrating, is it depends.
Yep.
And we already know that we're calling into everyone is unique. There's different backgrounds, there's different ailments, injuries, things that have happened, confidence levels, motivation, all these things have to be considered on top of where you're at and where you want to go, and even what you have access to equipment wise. So I'll simplify it the best I can, but I'm always thinking about all these different factors that involved. But even in 2 months, I would still keep everything as basic as possible. Until the 6 month mark, you're still a beginner in the terms of weight training, and then the intermediate period is going to be anywhere from 6 months, a year, to 3 years, 4 years. It all depends, right? So I like to start, obviously, depending on what people have access to and how frequently they're wanting to go. But 2 days a week is a great place to start. I like to focus on building a habit first and feeling comfortable and confident in the gym. And that can be really hard when you look around and see people doing heavy weights or failing at things, and that's scary to watch sometimes if you're not sure what's going on. But really starting at the most basic level. So I typically like to focus on body weight movements because that's setting the foundation, right? It's all about how can we effectively increase core strength, core not just being abs, but everything 360 degrees between your shoulders and your hips, because that's our stabilizers, and we need to be able to control that. Whereas machines can help, it's taking away a lot of that extra stability that we need, which we want it to transfer over to daily life. Daily life, most of the time we have to do these things on our own. Even as simple as putting a suitcase overhead on an airplane, if we're not practicing those movements, it's going to get harder and harder down for mobility and everything. So very basic starting program, building the foundation. So typically more muscular endurance based for a lot of people. So that could be set and rep ranges anywhere from 3 to 6 sets to 12 plus reps, or sometime in light weights. Sometimes if they have a little bit more confidence and experience, then I'll lower it a little bit and do more of a basic hypertrophy, but not really trying to increase the time under tension as much. That would come in the second base phase. But simple movements like body weight squats, for example, if you're starting from zero, we can do wall sits just for time to build muscular endurance. Then over time, we can add goblet squats, then maybe back squat, front squat, and so on. Same thing, we'll start with push-ups. We can work our way up to bench press, starting with dumbbell and then going to a barbell. And the same thing for all the other movements. There's a regression and progression for everything, and that's what's so great about training. There's so many combinations available.
Yeah. I loved your answer. It depends, because 100% agree with that. If somebody says this is the one right answer for everybody, then I think that's baloney.
Yeah, and I
The
think that's an important thing to keep in mind with training too. Everyone has their own coaching and training philosophy, and of course that's based on what you see in practice and on your experiences. But I like to think of everything as a tool. Like I'm not only gonna give TRX. That's a great tool, but that can only go so far. It's still great, but maybe I want some bands. I definitely want weights to be going from fives and tens up to as high as we can get you in most cases that's safe and with good form. So
Yep.
it's we always want to have as many tools in that tool belt as we can, and it just comes with time and practice. And training is frustrating. It gets to be monotonous at times. I typically a normal training cycle is anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks in most cases. And you can change the implements you use, you can change reps and sets, you can even change rest times to achieve different goals. Movements can only change so much. You have a lot available, but at some point it's just you find things that you enjoy doing, and sometimes you have sprinkle in the ones you don't want to do.
Right. Well, and a lot of people don't understand that strength is actually a skill. Like
Hmm.
that, and it's training of your nerves, it's
Yep,
training of, and that's the great thing about a beginner is they can get
that's exactly what I was gonna
stronger
say.
so fast, which is
Hmm.
so cool to see. You could take somebody, like we can put somebody out on our bench press
Hmm.
today. Say we take somebody and they can barely get up a 45-pound bar and it's all shaky. And if you take them back in 2 days, they might be able to do 5 of those. And then
Yeah.
2 days later, they might be able to do like 10 pounds on each side. And that jump in strength, that percentage jump, it's not because their muscles got that much bigger.
Hmm.
It's because
It's
their
all
nerves
neural.
started recruiting and learning the movement and all of those
Hmm.
things. And so I think
Which
like
is great, yeah. But
so cool.
sometimes people get frustrated. So I think that is a great point that you bring up because, yes, beginners are going to see really rapid improvements and it's super exciting, but then you might hit a plateau. And
Yeah.
it's nothing that you're doing wrong. It's just, it takes time to build muscle. That's a very long, slow process.
Yep.
And it just comes, unfortunately, with time. It's just one thing, it's the return on investment. It may shoot up first with a good stock, and then it's going to slowly just do its thing over time. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it can be great, but also good for people to recognize that it's okay for changes to be slow.
And I mean, you said something interesting to start is that you're going to try to get people to do twice a week because
Hmm.
Well, you're trying to build a habit,
Yes.
and you eventually, say you're 6 months in,
Hmm.
like your ability to see strength increases is going to go way down over that 6 months. So you see this big gain to start, and then there will be somewhat of plateauing, and you won't see that strength gains as fast. And also, you've got to know that we build muscle extremely slowly, like
Yes.
on the
And with
matter of,
age, it's even slower
yeah,
because protein absorption goes down, muscle protein synthesis goes down. So you have
yeah,
to be, it's just a game of patience.
yeah.
Hard work and patience
And consistency,
and
right?
consistency.
Just
Yes. Yeah.
doing it again and again and again. When
With progression, though, I think that's one thing also to emphasize is a lot of times people get frustrated because they do the same thing week in and week out for years. But if it's the exact same, if you're not changing reps, sets, time under tension, if you're not changing weight at or times, or I think rest times, I can't remember which ones I said already, but
yeah,
and even the movements and the implements you use, that's another reason that that could be occurring. Like we have to have this progressive overload in
yeah,
order for, because the easiest way to think of it is we start here with training. When we train, a lot of people think we're training this way. We
yeah,
train to go down slightly so that we can super compensate to be here. So we were here, now we're here. This is our new baseline.
yeah,
But once we're here, the same thing, we have to keep pushing a stress.
yeah,
Exercise is a stressor, and the human body adapts to stressors. That's what it's good at. That's what we're here to do, and that's what training does if it's structured well. Of course, we don't want to go too hard too fast and only go down. We need that rest time and deloads in order for that compensation to occur.
yeah. And I think that's a really good point for people to remember. Like one reason it's great to have a coach or work with
Hmm.
somebody is they're going to help you continue to do that progressive overload, deloading when you need it, helping you to break through those plateaus so that you
Hmm.
continue to make progress. And yes, the progress slows from the beginning, but it's amazing to me. Like I look back, I've been training now for, I don't know, 20 years. And I was such a skinny kid in high school. And I bought weight gainer, and I had like the old sand weights in my
Hmm.
basement. And whenever my friend would come over, I'd be like, let's bench. And he never lifted, but was always stronger than me. And it
Yep.
always made me like so upset. But just consistency over time works.
It
And,
does.
and so it's just getting people to believe that it's worth it. Consistency over time, progress over perfection. What's another good saying you can leave us with as we finish up? Like, what's another good saying? You must have one.
That's a good question. I think I gotta have a topic. What's a good saying we wanna be focused
Oh,
on? What's our main
I
point?
have to ask you a question, and then you'll come up with a saying. I
Yeah,
just can't
I
say,
can't
give me
just
a
be on the
saying.
spot. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say, okay, you already said failure is fertilizer.
Hmm.
Um, so what would you say if somebody said, I've tried this before, and, it didn't really work for me?
Let's try something new.
Okay.
Not a
Yeah.
good
No.
saying, but I mean,
Yeah.
if what you're doing hasn't worked, then we got to try changing something up and see what can. And I
Yeah.
think nutrition is a big piece that we definitely don't have time to dive into, but
Yeah.
a lot of times that could be the limiting factor. Like if you're trying to build muscle and build strength and you're not eating enough and having enough protein, then what do you're it's going to be pretty hard to build if you're not fueling your body, and the fueling is really what becomes super important too.
Well, and like you said, we don't have time to go into it, but
Hmm.
especially for women, men too, but especially for women who have been trying to calorie restrict for years
Hmm.
because of our diet culture. And they may see strength gains because most of those gains are neurologic over the
Hmm.
first 2 or 3 months. But if they really want to see muscle gains, they're going to have to eat in a calorie excess.
Yes, and it
To,
doesn't have to be crazy, but it does have to be something. And
yeah,
a lot of it is just, it's the same as training. Like we talked about, you could write a perfect program, but there might be something with someone that doesn't work and isn't optimal.
yeah,
And it's kind of like guess and check. You just have to try something different sometimes and just keep putting in the same work for both nutrition and exercise and rest.
That's right. That's right. 100%. That recovery, you have to build in that recovery. You have to build in the sleep, hydration,
Absolutely.
mobility, all of those
And
things.
it sounds like a lot, but you just start small and you just take it one step at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's another one. Someone once told me, as long as it's a step and it's up, you're moving in the right direction.
Wow. That's amazing. I knew you had another one. I knew
I
you
was
did.
down in there somewhere.
So perfect. All right. Kelly, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure that we'll have you back on to talk more fitness, nutrition things, but thanks so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.